The Dungeon Master Experience. This regular column is for dungeon masters who like to build worlds and campaigns as much as I do. Here, I share my experiences as a DM through the lens of Iomandra, my Dungeons & Dragons campaign world. Even though the campaign uses the 4th edition rules, the topics covered here often transcend editions. Hopefully, this series of articles will give you inspiration, ideas, and awesome new ways to menace your players in your home campaigns. If you're interested in learning more about the world of Iomandra, check out the wiki. Dungeon Master for Life, Chris Perkins. The best villain ever. Normally, I would kick things off by describing some thrilling event or happenstance from my home campaign. But we're breaking format this week to bring you the 3 winning entries from the Best Villain Ever contest. Thanks to everyone who submitted an entry. When I began analyzing why I liked these particular villains, I realized that each one was a textbook example of a villainous archetype. There's the villain born out of the hero's backstory, the villain hiding in the hero's midst, and the good aligned creature turned evil. Many of the contest entries fell into one of these 3 classic archetypes, though there were other archetypes represented as well. The world-destroying supervillain, the vengeance-driven villain, and the benefactor turned villain, just to name a few. Are these 3 truly the best villains ever? That's ultimately for you to decide. I chose the villains that resonated with me personally. Had you been the judge, you might have gravitated toward different things. However, all of the submissions did have one thing in common. Each villain was a deeply embedded element of the campaign, not just some disposable bad guy. Dragon Blackstone, Warlock Knight of Vasa. Here's an example of a villain the heroes are expected to despise from the get-go. Dragon's deeds are directly responsible for the situation in which they find themselves, and the reasons for hating him are hard-coded into their backgrounds. I admire a DM who can pit the heroes against a villain far too powerful for them, allow the villain to prevail without ending the campaign, and offer the players the promise of sweet, sweet revenge. Dragon doesn't need a black hat or a white cat to get the hero's attention. The day the heroes finally meet Dragon on equal footing promises to be the high point of the campaign. Also, the Warlock Knights of Vasa are just plain cool. Dragon Blackstone, Warlock Knight of Vasa. My best villain ever is from my home, Forgotten Realms campaign. He is a Warlock Knight of Vasa named Dragon Blackstone. The players crafted backstories for their characters, and a couple of them made up stories that involved their homes being destroyed when they were children, but they weren't really specific about the regions they were from. I decided to make them from the mountains surrounding Vasa and tie them together by the common thread that their villages were all destroyed by Dragon. Their first run-in with Dragon was while they were still very low level, and he knocked them unconscious and left them for dead lying in the dirt. A wandering shaman, a new player joining the campaign, discovered them and healed their wounds. The shaman was also very familiar with Dragon. His tribe was constantly avoiding the Warlock Knights. My players will have many run-ins with Dragon's henchmen before they are powerful enough to get their revenge. The best twist of the campaign is that one of my players thought he'd be clever and not create a backstory for his character. He told me his character woke up in the mountains with amnesia and has no recollection of his past. As the story unfolds, he will learn that he used to be one of Dragon's henchmen. Bill Buchalter, Indianapolis, Indiana. The porter who might be king. The best villain we ever had in a game was a hired porter for the party. He was a kind, wiry old man who shared fatherly advice and told great stories around the campfire. The party loved him, until one night when the party had uncovered a powerful artifact they had retrieved from a lich, and decided to camp outside the dungeon immediately afterwards. In the darkest hour of night, offering to watch over the camp while the party slept, the kindly old porter killed the PC with the artifact while he slept and disappeared into the night. What they didn't know was that the old man was once a cruel king who had been dethroned at a younger age and now had a way to get back what was once his. Aaron Scott, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The porter who might be king. Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal. The villains who lurk among the heroes is a great premise, difficult to pull off but incredibly gratifying when executed well. No pun intended. Sometimes a betrayal comes out of left field, usually when the idea occurs to the DM late in the game, but I think this one was planned from the very start, and that's awesome. Bravo! I often tell new DMs not to drink from the betrayal well too often. You can't have NPCs betraying the heroes at every turn. Makes the player suspicious of everyone, best case scenario, or just plain angry, worst case scenario. I'm a big fan of the villain in our midst, but if your players have been stung in the past, it's wise to drop a few clues before the big reveal. That way, when the players think you're screwing them over, you can point back at the clues and say, au contraire, or whatever they say in South Dakota. Havoc the Betrayer. I like challenging players' expectations, and a classic D&D example is the evil-aligned metallic dragon. This isn't a new idea, but it is often overlooked. My campaign includes a polymorphing silver dragon with evil ambitions. He's not nearly as capable or dangerous as Havoc, and I confess that I've used him as comic relief on occasion. I recall a time when the dragon, as he was taunting the heroes with a villainous monologue, landed on a wooden platform that couldn't support his weight. Havoc the Betrayer. Reader's note: there's a massive typo in this, in which Havoc the Betrayer is completely replaced by the Porter Who Might Be King. So, we'll just skip that. Havoc has the added virtue of being a monster as opposed to a two-armed, two-legged villain. Monsters are underused as major campaign villains, in my humble opinion. If a gold dragon can hold the hero's interest for multiple levels or even tiers of play, imagine what could be done with an evil treant hellbent on purging the natural world of civilization. An iron golem imbued with the sentience and ambition of its evil creator, or beholder crime lord. Havoc the Betrayer rekindled my desire to flip through the monster manual in search of the next big bad guy in my campaign, and that's why he made the cut. Lessons learned. Would I pilfer these villains for my own campaign? You bet. A campaign can never have enough good villains. I truly believe that. Aside from their admirable characteristics, the best villain ever contest winners remind me of three important things. Villains, even smart ones, make mistakes. Sometimes that includes not killing the heroes when they have the chance. Not every villain needs a world-shaping agenda to be cool, and villains come in all shapes and sizes. It's a bit of a digression, but Borax, one of our community members, has some wonderful DM advice embedded in his forum signature, which I am paraphrasing here. Dangle lots of plot hooks in front of your players. Anything they do not bite can come back and bite them later. I think the same advice applies to campaign villains. You never know which villains will rattle the players' cages, so the trick is to keep inventing new ones. Until the next encounter. I want to thank all of you who have made it to the end of this video. This reading comes from Chris Perkins' Dungeon Magazine series, The Dungeon Master Experience, in which Chris gives excerpts of wisdom and lessons he's learned from many years of running games. If you're interested in reading it for yourself, you can find a link down in the description along with links to where you can find the music used in this video, which is a product of Critical Role's Scanlan Shorthalt Press.